On there?
Yeah. I'll read this first one.
Good. The time is now March 25th, 2020. Now call to order this. Rest of this meeting posted pursuant to the emergency provisions of the Texas Open Meetings Act modified by the Office of the Attorney General in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The quorum of the Board of Trustees is present, including Scott Edwards, Chad Myers, Joe Hernandez, Larry Keeble, and Liza Stroke. Join me in the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, him on phone.
And Nancy's also joining us on the phone now. Mr. Rosenbaum will read for us the items submitted for public comment. Just as a reminder, while we continue to meet remotely, we will ask our community members to submit their comments in writing no later than 1 hour before the meeting. We may adapt this process going forward, and we will communicate any changes. Mr. Rosenbaum, will you please go ahead with the comments?
We did not have any comments as of 5 p.m.
Thank you. That concludes the public comment. We will move on to item 2. Consideration and deliberation regarding emergency needs of districts in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Rosenbaum, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. So I'm going to stand back here so I can make sure that my voice is heard. So I want to talk to you about a couple of things that you have at your place there with you. First, let's take a look at our DEA local policy. You can see this is the compensation and benefits, the compensation plan, and specifically at the bottom of the first page, it speaks to pay during closing. So let me read that. During an emergency closure, all employees shall continue to be paid for their regular duty schedule unless otherwise provided by board action. Following an emergency closure, the board shall adopt a resolution or take other board action establishing the purpose and parameter for such payments. And then the last section on DEA local is on the back of that page. Premium pay during disasters. Non-exempt employees who are required to work during an emergency closing for a disaster as declared by a federal, state, or local official or the board shall be paid at the rate of 1 1/2 times their regular rate of pay for all hours worked up to 40 hours per week. Overtime for time worked over 40 hours in a week shall be calculated and paid according to law. So that is our policy with regard to emergency closures. So we were given some guidance or some recommendations by our attorneys to revisit this. And let me kind of explain the way it was explained to me. Obviously, this COVID-19 pandemic, you can hear me okay? Obviously, this COVID-19 pandemic is unlike anything that we've seen. So there's a lot of different, I guess, suggestions or recommendations from our attorneys based on that. So a couple of examples for the reason that this particular policy was written. One was because of Hurricane Harvey. When Hurricane Harvey was going to hit the Texas coast, a lot of those people left. They left the hurricane hit, as y'all know, destroyed all kinds of property down there. Well, so what some of the school districts did was they asked people, if you're still here or if you can get here, we need your help. You need to come back to work. But not everybody could. So that's where something like that came in. If you were going to ask them to come back to work, but not everybody, then you have to pay them time and a half. Another example that was given to me, like, let's just say that we have a bad weather day and we call off school, we close school for everybody. But we needed our maybe maintenance or custodians to come in to prepare for the next day. Maybe the weather, they weren't allowed to do that. So we asked them to come in, but we're not asking everybody else to come in. Then we have to pay them that premium rate because we asked them to come in, but not everybody else. And so in this particular situation, everybody is working. We're not asking any particular group to come in when nobody else is working. Now their work looks a little different, obviously, right now. Hopefully, as we go forward through next week, it's gonna all start looking a lot similar. But it's different than those two situations that I described because we're not asking, hey, a certain group to come in. So we don't, it's not recommended to continue to pay premium pay for that. So if you would, let me go to the resolution that is recommended by our attorneys. So actually there are two parts to this resolution. I'll go over the second part when I get to that. So it is a resolution regarding administrative response and operational authority during COVID-19 pandemic. It says, whereas the Blanco Independent School District has closed from March 23rd to March 25th in response to COVID-19 pandemic. Because we haven't done that resolution yet, we have to consider that we were considered closed. Whereas the district will begin a period of limited or modified operations. And modified operations is the key term here. We have not necessarily closed school, although that's the language that's being used out there a lot. We're modifying our operations. Obviously, it's going to look very different. I mean, it's not going to be the traditional model that we have. And so anyway, it says the district will begin a period of limited or modified operations effective March 26, which will extend the length of time yet to be determined. The next one there, the district employs approximately 158 individuals. They contribute to the district's work to educate 1,034 students. Next, whereas the public purpose of the district is served by compensating all employees during this time of closure, as doing so will safeguard the health of our children, our families, our staff, and our community. Our funding is still going to flow from the state as long as we are providing some degree of instruction to our students. And because of that, then it's in our best interest to continue paying our staff. Next, whereas Blanco Isd Board Policy DEA Local provides for payments of employees during emergency closure. The next one, the public purpose of the district is served by our continued work to support our students and family during periods of closures and/or modified operations, as well as our efforts to ensure a safe return to normal school operations for both students and staff. Now, finally on this part, whereas the COVID-19 pandemic constitutes an unforeseen operational failure suffered by educational institutions and their physical facilities, as contemplated under Texas Education Code 44.031. So now the next part of this is about the procurement process. So right now, we are limited to spending a limit of $25,000 without having a board meeting to approve that. If we go over $50,000, we have to go through the bid process. We don't really know what this is going to look like during this time. We don't know if something's going to happen that's going to cause us to have to spend $75,000 on something. We're not really sure. We don't think that that's going to happen, but if it does, we don't want to have to spend 4 weeks trying to put requests for proposals together just so we can get something fixed if something happens. And so what that does is allows us to, during this particular time, go over those limits on both of those. So let me read a couple of bullets on this one. It says, whereas Blanco ISD board policy CH legal and CH local provides authority for purchasing and acquisition of goods and services and sets forth certain legal and local requirements. Whereas the delay posed by the competitive procurement methods set forth in board policy CH legal and CH local and otherwise required by chapter 44 of the Texas Education Code would prevent or substantially impair the conduct of classes or other essential school activities. And then whereas the Blanco ISD Board of Trustees has set an expectation of clear and timely communication regarding district operations, careful stewardship of the district's financial resources, and full compliance with federal, state, and local mandates, as well as board policies during this time. There would definitely, if we ended up having to do any of this, there would definitely be that communication with you. We would continue like we always have to be good financial stewards of our money. So you have those two different pieces to it. So then the resolution says, now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of Blanco Independent School District that the superintendent of schools is authorized to determine periods of closure and or modified operations as necessary in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, right now, we have said that we will modify our operations until April the 3rd, through April the 3rd. And then we hope, pray, we want to see our kids back on April the 6th. To be honest with you, not looking like that's going to happen. But you know, we didn't extend ourselves out there too far, but probably early next week we'll make a decision about whether or not we want to continue to modify our operations or our kids able to come back. So we just don't know. So obviously I will communicate with you guys as that comes up. Also, be it resolved that the superintendent of schools is authorized to compensate all Blanco ISD employees during periods of closures associated with the COVID-19 pandemic and is authorized to implement Blanco ISD board policy DEA local and make determinations administratively regarding compensation for all employees during periods of modified operations associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. And then one more about the procurement process. Be it further resolved that the superintendent of schools is authorized to take any actions pursuant to board policy CH local necessary to effectuate the district's appropriate and effective response to the COVID-19 pandemic as described herein, including purchasing unbudgeted goods for services in excess of $25,000 without prior board approval, and purchasing unbudgeted goods or services in excess of $50,000 by methods other than those required by the Texas Education Code section 44.031. So right now, if we pass this resolution, it's in effect until April the 3rd. But if we end up modifying our operations for a longer period of time than whatever that time, and we would put, some people are saying indefinite. I don't want to do that. I prefer to go about 2 weeks at a time, maybe 3 weeks at a time. Because I can tell you, I want our kids back. We miss our kids already. So anyway, and whatever, if we do extend the modified operations, then that would move the date for this resolution. Anybody have any questions?
So we're gonna pay, all teachers are gonna be paid their normal wages, 40 hours a week.
That's correct. All staff,
Okay, all staff,
their normal hours, yes.
it's normal hours. Now, there's some staff that's being called to come up and do their work from here.
That's correct, yes. Hold on, I want to make sure so the question was, is all staff going to continue to get paid their normal working hours during the week? The answer was yes. And your second question, I'm sorry.
Does that include non-exempts?
The question is, does that include non-exempt? Yes, all staff will continue. Now, if they're part-time, they will continue to be paid part-time. So whatever it is that they have their normal weekly hours, yes, they will get their normal pay.
And then the ones that you're requiring to come to campus, they're gonna get the extra time and a half or?
Okay, so so the question is are the ones that are being required to come to campus going to get the extra, the premium pay, right? That was your question was. Well, so, no, because we're gonna be working remotely a lot. So the expectation is gonna be that at times you will work from here. If you're not working from here, you'll be working from home. So they will be working regardless of whether they're in the district or not. I'll give you a good example. So we are providing a meal service. So our cafeteria ladies are here every day. They've already been here every day. They're here from about 7 in the morning till about 10:30 in the morning. So they're gonna have to physically be here to be able to serve those meals. And like I said, this is unlike anything that we've done before because this week has been very difficult. I mean, I can tell you, there's just been a hodgepodge of who's been working, who hasn't. A lot of people are working from home. A lot of people are here. We will have that in line next week so that everybody has the same expectation about what it should look like. Again, it might look like part of your time is on campus and part of it is not. But when you're not on campus, there is an expectation for working from home. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess it's not part of this resolution, but what are we doing to try to protect those people that are coming to campus, that they're not, what's the social distancing rules or whatever that we're doing here so that they don't have, they can't pick up the virus here and take it back home.
Right. I can tell you we're talking about that on a daily basis. Let me make sure. So what his comment was about people coming to campus and having the virus and taking it back home or picking up the virus. So it's just like you're hearing with everything else, there are going to be essential personnel. Well, we're going to be very limited. Hopefully, it may take us till about Wednesday of next week to really get a real small skeleton crew here, because obviously our cafeteria ladies are going to be up here, but it's not all of them. Like I think the first 2 days our elementary staff was here while the others were home making phone calls. So just because they weren't here doesn't necessarily mean they weren't worried. But at some point, we're going to be as remote as possible. I mean, I will most likely be here every day, probably our administrators. We may have, what we're going to have to do is, if we have somebody come in, maybe what we're dealing with right now is we got to get our staff up here so that they can get their equipment so they can work remotely. We have some students that have up at campuses and we're trying to figure that out. Our custodians, like, they're going to have to come in behind us and clean this up real good tomorrow. So we're working on that. Once we started serving meals from 8:30 to 9:30 in the morning. Our intention is, and it's going to take some time because we sent out 1,100 surveys. As of this afternoon, we had about 800 back. So we've got to make phone calls. We've got to figure out who needs meals, who needs them delivered, we really have about 75% of our students that are saying that they can work online from home. Well, if they can't, then we have to provide package, which means we're going to have people up here, prepare those packets, hand those out. But it's going to be very limited staff. So to answer your question, we're not going to have our entire staff up here. We're going to have we will not have more than 10. And we have strictly abided by the 10, and we have strictly abided by the social distancing. In fact, Colin has a stick that's 6 feet long, and she walked up to 2 the other day and said, "Can I fit this stick between y'all?" So we're strictly adhering to those as much as we can. So with that, Larry, I know that's a concern of a lot of people, and it's a concern of ours. I can tell you that's something we talk about every single day, and it's heavy on our minds. And so until we can get to the point where we're almost remote, it's going to take us a little bit of time.
Just as we only think you'd come up with definitely necessary. There's not a way for them to work from home.
Right.
And as students, what are we doing as far as our cafeteria and stuff? How are they protecting the food they're producing? Are they wearing?
Yes, they wear. they wear protective gear whenever they're
We got
preparing it.
that for 'em.
And then, of course, when families come to pick up that, and when they come to pick up work or, packets or whatever, they're not getting out of the car. They're not getting out of the car. So it's difficult. It's still a lot of those things that we're trying to work through. We have some of our staff that have kids at home. So we've had those conversations. How can they come to work if they have 4 kids at home? Well, we have to work around their schedule. There are things they can do at home. So we've talked about the fairness of, we can't put it all off on somebody else, but there is work that can be done at home. So there are lots of different issues like that. So anyway, any other comments on that? Questions?
What are you doing for employees that may be experiencing some sort of illness around them? Or not?
We've had a few that have mentioned that they weren't feeling well.
We're here.
Oh, sorry. The question was, what are we doing for those, if we have a staff member that might be feeling ill or showing signs? We tell them, stay home. You need to stay home for 14 days. We'll do our best to try to get you work to do while you're at home. We do have a couple that traveled and came back, told us they had traveled, and we're just doing some quarantining out of precaution. But we talk about that. If we think if they don't look like they feel well, we'll send them home. And we won't send them home without pay. We won't send them home without pay because we will be able to have them do something at home.
There's a lot of information that, whether it's true or not, that's going out and around on Facebook and being shared on social media. One of the things that came up recently that I was asked about was about kids needing something out of their lockers and scheduling a time to come in to the school. Is that something that we feel as though it's prudent to let those kids, even if we're restricting the numbers, is that even a true statement that it's even allowed?
Well, okay. Yes, it is. So I'm going to kind of explain this. So I said this, Colin and I were talking this afternoon when we were setting up over here. This is one of those situations where I feel like I'm on skis and I'm skiing down a hill and that avalanche is right there on my shoulders, but I don't see the bottom of the hill. It changes so fast. Y'all saw in my email, we will literally have meetings and work something out and then have to change it at the end of the day. Our intention at the beginning was to let them come back, get some things if they needed it so that they could work from home. Same with our staff. We changed that. If a kid needs something, then like if it's a high school student, if they need something, then they can call the school, get with the administration, they'll gather it for them, and then we'll get it to them and kind of like a grab and go, kind of like we do with our middles. We have some issues with our elementary students because there's some things they have. A lot of their books that they use are consumable books, so we're going to have to get those in the hands of it, but we're not letting students in the buildings. Any other questions?
That's good.
Very good. Thank you, Clay. Our next item is 3, and with that, the board will convene in closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.071, consultation with legal counsel regarding the legal implications of the district's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The time is 6:26.